Hi there, my name's James Kelly and welcome back to Scot Goes Pop. My eye was caught by a story on the website of The National, which is John Swinney dismisses SNP members' rival independence plan, and he dismisses it with the words, "It won't work." And you've really got to admire the chutzpah of someone who is panned almost universally for coming up with a completely unworkable plan for independence. For him to actually criticize somebody else's plan for being unworkable is really quite something. And I've already explained numerous times, and other people have as well, why the rebel plan, whatever you might think of it, is self-evidently more workable than John Swinney's plan, because what the rebels, or we shouldn't really call them the rebels, being the so-called rebels, what they're proposing is that all the votes for pro-independence parties, regardless of what those parties are, SNP, Green, Alba, Liberate Scotland, whatever, would count towards a possible outright mandate for independence on the list ballot. And if you get over 50% of the vote for those parties in combination, then you've got a mandate. Whereas John Swinney is saying it has to be an outright majority of seats for the SNP alone, which under a proportional representation system is extremely difficult to do, bordering on impossible. Now, it is hard, of course, to get a pro-independence majority on the list ballot, even with all the parties in combination, but it was done at the last election in 2021. It's harder now, of course, because the SNP are at a lower level of support, much lower level of support, but it can still be done if you get the SNP back into the 30s, get the Greens well into the teens, and there might be a role, a small percentage for other parties that might get you over the line to 50% plus one. So in that sense, the rebel plan is self-evidently more workable than John Swinney's own plan. However, let's see what he means by unworkable. And what he says is, I don't think that's an argument that would have any legal force at the end of it because it's not an agreed process. Now, what he means by that is that if you get a mandate for independence via the list ballot, as using it as a de facto referendum, that would not automatically result in independence, which is true. You would then have to use that mandate as leverage to try and bring the UK government to the negotiating table, and there might have to be some compromise at that point. If you get them to the negotiating table, they might want a confirmatory referendum afterwards. You may have to tack a little bit to get what you want. But at least you do have some leverage that you didn't have before. For the very first time, you've got an outright mandate for independence, which gives you a lot of moral authority and does pile a lot of pressure on the UK government and can perhaps win friends in the media and so on who might start to argue your case. But the other point is that you then have to compare. I mean, if he's saying that the weakness of the rebels' proposal is that it would not have legal force at the end of it and it's not an agreed process, you then have to compare that to John Swinney's plan and to see whether those deficiencies don't apply to his plan, which he's implying they don't. And of course, those deficiencies are there in his plan as well. There is no legal force at the end of this process that says if you get an SNP overall majority, a single party SNP overall majority, that will result in a referendum. That's not agreed with the UK government, is it? Is it, John? Have you reached a binding agreement with the UK government that an SNP overall majority will result in a referendum? No, you haven't. You haven't got a commitment, even an informal commitment that it will. And in fact, we know it probably will not because the UK government are just being intransigent for the sake of it. And they will always move the goalposts to say that you would need a higher mandate. In all probability, if the SNP got their overall majority, asked for a referendum, the answer would be no, see you in 5 years. So it's just ludicrous from that point of view. You can't criticize somebody else's plan for not being agreed, not having legal force, when your own plan is not agreed and it does not have legal force. And it's clearly inferior to the other plan because at least if you get a mandate for an outright mandate for independence that is not being respected by the UK government, that is still superior to a mandate for a referendum that is not being respected by the UK government. There's still more you can do with that. It gives you more leverage, more moral authority. You might ironically be far more likely to get a referendum by achieving an outright mandate for independence than you would be by getting yet another mandate simply for a referendum. You need that higher grade of mandate to actually get the UK government to start taking you seriously. We've got mandates for referendums coming out of our ears. They are always ignored. It doesn't matter if you tweak the criteria a little bit and say, oh, this is going to be a super duper mandate, which you can't get anyway. Everybody knows you can't get it. But even if you did get it, it wouldn't make any difference. It is just silly. So what else is he saying? He says, totally I understand the frustration of people inside my own party and outside my party and across the community. I totally understand that frustration and I feel it. But I don't think I am serving people well if I put in front of them a proposition that I know in my heart is not going to work. That troubles me, and I wonder if in retrospect he might regret using those words, because as numerous people have pointed out, he is not a fool, and he knows full well that the SNP are not going to win an overall majority. They're not going to win a single party overall majority. He knows, he must know, he's an intelligent man. He must know that he's setting a completely unattainable target. He is setting a target that is predetermined to fail. So for him to say that he wouldn't be serving people well if he put in front of people a proposition that he knew in his heart wasn't going to work, when that is exactly what he's doing, and he must know that's exactly what he's doing. It's troubling that he's actually used those words, and I wish he hadn't done that. He also makes a comment, I think, about Catalonia. Yeah, I don't think it's an idea worth pursuing because it's going to lead to the type of situation that has emerged in Catalonia. Without an agreed process, Catalonia tried to secure its independence and it did not succeed. That's a disingenuous argument, because in Catalonia you have a situation where the Spanish state regards any attempt whatsoever to achieve Catalan independence as illegal. You know, as a very serious crime bordering on treason almost. It's against the Spanish constitution to even attempt to separate out apart the Spanish state. So irrespective of what methods the Catalan political leaders had used to try and make Catalonia independent, it would not have succeeded unless they had resorted to extreme means, and then who knows what would have happened, but it wouldn't have been pleasant. So to say that you've got to learn from Catalonia's mistakes is an argument either for giving up on civic nationalism, which I don't think any of us want to do, or certainly we shouldn't do that, or to just give up completely. Is that really what he's saying? Because otherwise that Catalonia comparison does not make sense, and it's a bogus one. But anyway, what I do want to stress is that the worst part of John Swinney's plan is the precedent it will set. If the SNP actually go into an election saying that only an SNP overall majority, a single party overall majority, constitutes a mandate for a referendum, then that is a precedent that the UK government will exploit in future elections to say that nothing we manage is good enough, nothing we do constitutes a mandate. We could have, like a 2/3 majority of pro-independence parties, but because there is not a majority for a single party, which is almost impossible to achieve under proportional representation, the UK government can say that is not a mandate, and we have the precedent of the SNP going into an election saying that themselves. It is so, so important that we never set that precedent, and that's why John Swinney's proposal really must be either defeated or severely modified. It would almost be better to go into an election with no plan whatsoever than to go in with this plan that is going to set this horrific precedent and really damage the independence cause for potentially decades to come. So please, I urge you, we've got to change this. Anyway, I'll leave it there for now. If you're enjoying this content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you later.